it, and I went back to the university, got a postgraduate degree in conflict resolution, and then I started working for the Supreme Court in India. That's me giving a lecture with the Chief Justice in India. And I would travel around India to all the high courts and teach judges and lawyers about settling cases outside of court. And as Prabhuji said, I also am a consultant for NASA. And so when we moved back to America, I started working with NASA. And yeah, I think that's it. That's just a little introduction.
Yeah.
Jai Jagannath. So how will I do this if my back's not to the Lord? I'm so used to standing when I do this. Okay, so this is, I think, a 3 or 4 part presentation this weekend and next weekend. Is that right? Yes, I'm pretty sure it is. So Krishna was a lousy, terrible mediator. By his mercy, this is him mediating between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. There's Dhritarashtra there. And by his mercy, it was unsuccessful. Right? But all of us could be much more successful than Krishna by his mercy also. Okay? And it's really important that, you know, we in ISKCON, we walk our talk. We say that, you know, I remember going in Delhi. Maybe, how many of you been to Delhi? Okay, almost everyone. I don't know if you've ever seen the Sankirtan buses there, and they on the side of the bus it says, for a anxiety-free life, read Bhagavad Gita as it is. And whenever I read that, I was saying, what edition of Bhagavad Gita are they reading? Yeah. But anyway, our internal culture should match our message to the world. We should. And Prabhupada talks about this. You have dedicated your life to Krishna, and therefore you should be ideal. We are introducing Krishna consciousness movement for the harmony and goodwill of humanity. But if you yourself are suffering from the very ills we are trying to remove, how can the people be influenced favorably? Stop this fighting, tolerate. And one of the things that really inspired me to get into this is a statement by Prabhupada. Said that externally no one can stop ISKCON. Only way it can be hampered is if we fight internally. And he saw that in his own life with his godbrothers and the Gaudiya Math, so he had personal experience of that. Right? So it's actually really important. It's not just a side issue. It's really important we get along with each other. Okay? A few other statements. I'm very concerned, however, that in the midst of such good reports, the devotees there are quarreling. This report is not very good. And we have so much work to do, we cannot lose our solidarity. We should not cause a crack there with any fighting spirit or competition. Whenever I hear complaints or disturbances in our centers, my mind becomes too much disturbed, and I cannot properly translate my books. So please spare me from such disturbances by cooperating all together, God brothers and God sisters. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, no worries? Okay, good. All right, so I have 4 more pages of quotes by Prabhupada along this line, but I'm not going to present them all to you today. But it's certainly important. So let me ask you, by the way, this is not going to be just a lecture. I want this to be interactive. And anytime you have a question or a comment, don't wait till the end. Anytime, raise your hand, okay? Please, this is informal. We're all friends here. Okay, this is not a formal lecture. So let me ask, when you hear the word conflict, what's one word that comes to your mind? Argument.
Disagreement.
Ego? Only ladies talk in this yatra. Is that how it works? The men just say whatever the ladies say.
No conflict.
Well, actually, that's how my marriage works. We've been married 37 years, and my wife is the daughter of a general. Okay? So when she just, I just do what she says, and we have no conflicts. One word for conflict from anyone other, well, maybe some of the male species? Difference of opinion? Tension? Disagreement? Anger. One more.
Clashes.
Clashes. Okay. So all of those are kind of negative, right? Yeah. Right. But really, in reality, if conflicts are handled well, when after they're over, there's better relationships. So it's not a sign of a bad organization that there's conflicts. Matter of fact, it would be a sign of a bad organization if there was no conflicts. Because if there was no conflicts, that would mean nobody cares anymore. And the organization's just going downhill. But the one mark of a really good organization is how they deal with conflicts. Okay? So, in groups of like 3 or 4, just take 2 or 3 minutes and talk what are the costs and consequences of conflict in ISKCON. So just find 2 or 3 people, turn around, whatever, find some groups. Do you do this a lot or don't? Anyway, do it, please. Just find someone. It could be 2 people, it could be people that you really don't like. Ladies in the back, gentlemen in the back. It seems that the further you go away, the less you're likely to make groups. So talk about this, please.
Cost not only dollar cents, but in the society, less harmony among members, less opportunities for devotion weekends, gives strength to our opponents like this week.
You already have?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
2 more minutes.
Young generation, without again same thing. Devotion weekends,
opportunities for new people.
Can we have we have another microphone?
Yeah.
That's what we do. Okay, so let's hear some of your thoughts.
Open.
Yes, ma'am.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So, conflicts within ISKCON may result in dilution of standards which are prescribed by Srila Prabhupada, because one of the main things which Prabhupada said was for the movement to flourish, we need to cooperate with each other.
You have another one?
The other, the outside people, may speak very ill about ISKCON.
Right, so it hurts our outreach. Some of the gentlemen.
especially our detractors like the Ritvik side. They may,
Detractors. We have detractors.
yeah, the Ritvik, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they-
Yes, it might encourage them. Like, just say, wonderful for them. They like it. Yes.
Conflicts over sharing of power, name, fame, and might result in people breaking away,
Uh-huh.
starting a parallel movement or a parallel organization. Still based on Prabhupada's philosophy, but then away from ISKCON.
Name, fame, and glory, the same old story. Yes.
It hampers the progress of the whole mission. It hampers that. So Prabhupada had said
It
it.
hampers the word, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much hampers the outreach. Yes.
And there are some severe costs if there is a big conflict. So things like it can result into legal costs, reputation costs, people outside may think that oh, ISKCON people are all fighting within themselves. So what spirituality is there?
Yes. Are you an accountant? Okay, just you think about money. I just wanted to check.
So I think the Prabhu looks like the cost starts outwardly, but it starts with us because we deviate from me, like having Krishna in the center, but we start putting ourselves in the center. And the consequences of that, our sadhana, our Vaishnava pran, our attitude, all the divine qualities we are aspiring for to dedicate is, so it starts from internal and it affects as a consequence externally.
Yes, so it affects our consciousness and affects our sadhana. Yeah, I mean, like when you think about it, if we were honest, I think sometimes someone that we're really upset with or angry or at war with, we sometimes think of them more intensely than we do our loved ones. Right? I mean, that means we're just following in the footsteps of Kamsa. Right? Because he was really Krishna conscious, right? Kamsa was always, Shishupal also, really focused on Krishna. Not favorably, but still really focused. So yeah, thank you for that. So there's a lot of costs, right? There's a lot of consequences to ourselves individually as devotees, and also for our service to Srila Prabhupada's mission. Okay, so we're going to talk, a lot of, today will be some understanding the causes of conflict, okay? And then, but don't worry, I'm just not going to talk about how to solve conflicts, otherwise you won't come back. But if I leave that for tomorrow, then hopefully you'll come back, all right? So what causes conflict? The number one cause of conflict is when we make assumptions. In ISKCON, in politics, in the world, in your family, with your parents, with your children, with your spouse, when we make assumptions that end up being wrong. We make assumptions all the time. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it. But when we make assumptions that are wrong, it can cause big, big trouble. I'm going to ask you to think of some assumptions in the Shastra. There's many, 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 many of them that cause problems. But I'll give you, we'll cover one right now to give you a little taste of what examples we're looking for, okay? So here, Vibhishana is surrendering to Lord Ram, right? And look at the body language of the monkey warriors. They are assuming that he's, a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? That he's actually, yeah. And Hanuman gets it, he understands, and Lord Ram, but the others are making assumptions. And what are they making assumptions based on? Well, his birth, right? He was born in a demon family. His association, who did he associate with? Ravan, and who else? Yeah, all the demons, etc. Ravana, etc. yeah. Satyajit, yeah, Indrajit, and Kumbhakarna, yeah, a lot of bad folks. And you don't see it here so much, but it is explained in Ramayana that he was still dressed in his demon vesh, you could say, when he surrendered to Lord Ram. So do we ever make assumptions about people based on their birth? Anyone here from Bihar? Okay, we can make, then we can't make fun of Biharis. I'm a Bihari also, Braja Bihari. So it's not fun. Right. But, do we make fun, seriously, we sometimes say, oh, so-and-so's from such and such place. Right? Or who they associate with, or how they dress. Like if I came in today, I don't know, with hair down to here, and like a tie-dye shirt, or with different tilak, impersonal tilak, would you make some assumptions about me? Yeah? Maybe you're already making maybe you made some assumptions, oh, this is going to be so boring, why did I go to this presentation? So we make assumptions all the time. Okay? But when we make them and they're wrong, and then we act on them, it can create havoc. So can you think of some assumptions in the Shastra? Yes, Mataji.
Parikshit Maharaj is saying that the Rishi was
Very good. Very good. This is a big one. That's what you're saying. Yeah, Parikshit Maharaj. Oh. Are you quoting me or her? Because I called on her, I get some of the credit. Parikshit Maharaj assumed that Samyak Rishi was faking samadhi because he didn't want to, serve him, right? And when you look at all the consequences of that one assumption. Now, of course, it was Krishna's arrangement. We understand that. But still, Kali Yuga began because it said that Shringi, his son, cursed, right? Parikshit Maharaj died in 7 days. The Bhagavatam was spoken, all because of one assumption. Other assumptions? You got to, actually, you should raise your hand just because, it's proper. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, I had Daksha example.
Daksha, what's the Daksha example?
He assumed that Lord Shiva deliberately was meditating, as pretended to be in meditation.
Oh, yes, okay. So Daksha assumed that Shiva was faking it, Lord Shiva was faking it, yes. And a lot happened because of that one. You see how assumptions can have consequences? Anyone in the back? Yes, sir. Prabhu. Who's that? Oh, Kaikeyi. Oh, yeah, Kaikeyi, big time. And who was she influenced by? Right? Are we ever influenced by others? You ever hear somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, what's your name, Prabhu?" Ayush. Okay, say, listen. That guy, Ayush. Right? And then when you meet him for the first time, don't you already have some impression? Right? So, Mantra really twisted Kaikeyi's mind around. Just like, yes, and look at all that. And what happened because of that one? My gosh. The whole Ramayana practically. Yeah, from one assumption. Very good. Others? Yes? Jamantaka jewel. Yes. They assumed that Krishna took the jewel and killed Prasena. Yeah, actually, you all got the ones that I'm going to show in a few minutes. This is really a smart group. You know Shastra very well. So many examples. So many. Do we want one more? Oh wait, we heard from you already. Yes.
When Arjuna won the Swayamvar, they came back home and Kunti Mata asked if to distribute the prize about this. So she didn't know what.
She assumed that it was yes.
Yeah, so that's the relation.
Yeah, that was a very interesting assumption, wasn't it? Share with your. Okay. So the Yamadutas assumed that Yamaraj was supreme, right? Hiranyakashipu assumed he was eternal. And then this one, Chitraketu, right? Parvati, she assumed that Chitraketu was making fun of her husband. And several chapters of the Bhagavatam happened because of this assumption. So assumptions can have big impacts. We heard about this one, Parikshit Maharaj garlanding with the dead snake. And this is one, when Vishwarup took sannyas, Sachimata assumed that Advaitacharya had persuaded him to do so. Therefore she accused Advaitacharya of this, which was an offense at his lotus feet. Later, Lord Chaitanya induced his mother to take the dust of Advaitacharya's lotus feet, and thus her Vaishnava aparad was nullified. Okay, so even the mother of God can make assumptions. And so I want you to think about this takes a little thought sometimes, but think of a time when either you made an assumption that ended up being wrong, or someone made an assumption about you that was wrong or unfair. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so to think about that. It's amazing how in silence half a minute can seem like eternity, isn't it? Who has an example? Okay, Prabhu. I don't know if this will reach all the way up there.
Okay, I can speak up.
Okay.
So probably when I was young in 70s,
You're not young now. You look like buckshot.
so we heard about this ISKCON movement. I'm from Agra, quite close to Vrindavan.
Yeah.
And then at that time my impression was that, you know, that song was there also in the movie.
Yes, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna is a
So we
movie.
thought this movement is like for all drug addicts and those kind of people. And only after coming to Singapore, I realized that actually they are following the scriptures and everything.
Amazing. So you're a UP Walla. Very good. My son is also a UP Walla. Born in Manila. Good, that's a good example. And unfortunately, that was, many people had that assumption in India after that movie came out. Yeah, so many. What else? Yes? Can you speak loudly?
1997.
1990, okay, so we're going from the 70s to 1997.
1997. So my brother was the first person who joined the movement.
Your brother?
So like he was doing engineering in Pune
You're doing
college,
engineering.
and where the Pune ISKCON temple they had a program called this program.
Yeah, in Kant, in Pune Kant,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
I
And
know.
that is how he came into the movement.
That's right.
So he was the first person ever who came into ISKCON, a young boy like 22 years of age. So our entire family used to say that these ISKCON people, they were hoping young boys, and they take into the movement and they would make brahmacharis, life will be ruined.
Life will be
After
ruined.
many years when everybody saw and like he all started following him, then like what a benediction like he got by joining the movement. And because of him, our entire family got initiated.
Oh, nice. Is he still Brahmachari?
No, he's not a brahmachari, he's a trust, but he had joined. So they thought that like, you're
He
hoping
would
young
come,
boys and take them.
Very interesting. So similar assumptions, different, 25 years difference. Yes. Yeah, I know Pune well. We used to say, Pune, Pune, Charvita, Charvinana. One more? Yes, Prabhu.
We can reach. That's it.
Actually, before I come to Krishna conscious, I was a Christian, I was from the church.
You were Christian?
Yeah. So when I first came, we went for one festival and I saw some brahmachari was selling books. You know. I came with my friend and he wanted to buy a book, you know. He wanted to buy a book. So I just told him, you know, don't buy, they will brainwash you. So this was my assumption. So somehow or other, Krishna's mercy, I went to his house one day, then he was on the telephone, you know. So I saw the book, Ishopanishad. He bought the book on the table. So I just took and read the first page. After reading the first page, I told my friend, can I borrow the book? So after that, I became someone other.
Okay, so a lot of assumptions like that about our initial impression of Islam, of devotees. Okay. So we make assumptions, I just want to reiterate, we make assumptions all the time. You probably 5 or 10 times a day, I would assume. But, and there's nothing wrong with assumptions. Probably more than half of them are accurate. But when we get it wrong and then we act on it, it can be a problem. The gentleman in the pink shirt, you have your hand up. Yes, sir. Also, just a few years ago.
So I read, I learned about Bhagavad Gita, and I thought Bhagavad Gita is the only religious book related to Krishna. The moment I got into Krishna consciousness, then I realized that it's not that small lake, it's a huge ocean of, learning.
Very good. Very good.
So I'm still trying to study.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, what assumptions do people in Singapore make about ISKCON devotees? And by the way, assumptions can be positive. Maybe people think, you're all fantastic. But what assumptions do people make about followers of Prabhupada here in Singapore?
Yeah.
Yes?
they usually seem very balanced in both spiritual and material in terms of education, career, but at the same time devoting our lives to Krishna. At least that's what my friends say from outside.
That's very good. So that's very positive. Wow. Good. Anyone else? I mean, who else? Yes. Bihariwala.
So many of my friends think that we are leading a very dull life, just chanting all the time, doing deity service. We don't have anything, no fun in our life.
Yeah. They're really having a ball, and we're bored. Yeah, but that's an assumption. Some people make. One more. Yes.
Which I will say as a parents, the people in Singapore who are not in the group, they think that, like Prabhu said, we don't have a social life. But at the same time, when they see our Gopal Gardens children, they feel how nice it would be if their children can live there. So the conflict is that as a parent, they don't want to be, have that time spent, but as a children, they want them to become like that.
Yeah. Okay. So it's good to be aware of assumptions that people make. Not that we have to get really mental about it, but it is good to be aware that people sometimes make assumptions. So like I said, when you act on a bad assumption, it can be a problem. And in terms of if we make negative assumptions about devotees, then we have to be careful. Lord Chaitanya warned the devotees not to commit Vaishnava aparad, which he described as the man-elephant offense. When a man-elephant enters a beautiful garden, it destroys everything, leaving the field barren. I couldn't find a picture of an elephant in a garden. This was the best I could do. So imagine if you can do that to a car. Imagine what an elephant could do if you have a nice garden with marigolds and roses and vegetables, and then the elephant just go kaptam hogya, right? Finished. It's really trouble. So we want to be really careful, especially when we're making assumptions about devotees, because devotees are dear to Krishna. Right? And don't do this. Okay? Whatever you do, be careful about that, okay? I've done that once, never gonna do it again. And anyone here a worrier? Anyone here tends to worry? Or only me? I'm the only one who worries. Okay. I love this quote from Mark Twain. I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. In other words, we make assumptions that something is going to go wrong, and then it doesn't. Of course, sometimes it does, to kalayam sashritam, but the mind is a tricky person. Right? Mind's tricky. Okay, so I'll tell you the story about this red Mustang. Do they have Mustangs here in Singapore? Fords? Yeah. Okay. So when I was working for the U.S. government, I would travel a lot, way too much. So when we traveled for the U.S. government, after we arrive in the city, we have to rent a car, and we're only allowed to rent economy cars, right? Because it's government. Probably most governments of the world are like that. So I don't know, what's an inexpensive economy car here in Singapore? A Prius? Okay. Anything even cheaper than that? I have a Prius at home. Now you've offended me. Okay, do you have Fiat 500s here? Yes? No? Okay. Anyway, you can imagine just a simple car. So I arrived late at night in Oklahoma City, a city in America, and they only had one car left in the whole car rental place, and it was a red Mustang convertible. So they had to give it to me at the economy rate, right? Because it's not my fault. That was the only car that they had left. So I was super happy I got to drive this to the place that I was working the next day. So I go to the office, and it was early in the morning, so the parking lot only had 2 or 3 cars in it, so you could see the red Mustang from like a kilometer away, right? It was obvious. So I go in, I set up my computer to do a training, and no one shows up. So I wait 15 minutes, 20 minutes, finally, a half hour later, I go to the manager and I say, I'm ready to do the training. And his body language like it, and then about a 3-hour car ride the next day, and I said, what? And I was working with indigenous people, Native Americans, American Indians, who, anyway, he said, we're so sick and tired of hot shots like you from Washington, D.C. You know, who the hell do you think you are? That's what he said to me. We had never met. And I said, what? And he said, well, you know, we're government employees also, and we only rent economy cars, and who do you think you are? Renting that fancy car. So at first I laughed, you know, because then he got more angry, but eventually I explained what happened and we worked it out. But the point was he made an assumption based on the kind of car I was driving. Do we ever make assumptions based on the kind of car people drive? Yeah, sometimes, you know. So this is how assumptions work. First, we just observe the world like we would like with our phone, taking a video, right? Neutrally, okay? But then we focus, we select something to focus on, right? Well, Parikshit Maharaj focused on seeming Samagrishi was meditating, or Parvati focused on kind of the facial expression of Chitraketu, what was going on there, right? And then we make some assumptions based on the meaning that we add to that. So he assumed I paid more for the car, right? And Parvati assumed that Chitraketu was making fun of her. You often draw a conclusion. Chitraketu is an offender, right? Or in my case, I was a hot shot from DC, right? And then that often reinforces beliefs like, you know, if you know anything about American history, Native Americans, indigenous people have not had good luck with older white men from Washington, D.C. over the last 250 years. You know, they stole their land and everything. And then they took an action. Well, in Parvati's case, she cursed Chitraketu, and in my case, they temporarily canceled the training. So how long do you think it takes to go up that ladder?
Pretty quick.
Yeah, a second or two, right? Yeah, right. If I walked in here today with like a $5,000 Armani suit on, how long would it take you to make some assumption about who is he? Right. So. Okay, so assumptions are the #1 cause of conflict. So how to deal with assumptions? Is there some fun? Are you just trying to make more room? There's some space here for ladies, and come on, we're all from India, we can fit another 1,000 people in there. It's no problem. All right, so how to deal with assumptions. Are you ready for this? Yeah, are we settled there? Okay. Well, an American president once said, trust but verify. So how to do that? The first thing is to remember this, right? That we all have these 4 defects, every conditioned soul. And you know, I think we forget it sometimes, even though we've read it in you read it in Ishopanishad when, you know, many years ago when you were becoming a devotee. We commit mistakes. Okay? Who here has never committed a mistake? That's what I thought. All right. We can be illusioned. A few weeks ago, I was in Perth, in Australia. I'm doing a little tour because most of the time I do this training online. And so if you know the time zones, I can pretty much fit in people from Los Angeles to India. But after that, it's like 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. So I thought, I have a couple of months, so I'm just traveling. I've been 5 cities in Australia, then I went to Bali, Jakarta, Seoul, now Singapore, and then Manila. Like that's just kind of meeting all the nice devotees. But anyway, I was in Perth, and I don't, this is such a weird optical illusion, but when we were going towards the beach to watch the sunset, and from a far distance, what was an ocean looked like a big gray building. Obviously, as we got closer, oh, that was, but my illusion, my senses are imperfect. Right? So this really is true. You know, we often believe our perceptions so much, but we have, I don't think anyone here has a cheating propensity. You're all wonderful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. But the other three, we can definitely have experience, right? Sometime. So that's the first thing, is just to remember that. And then you can come down the ladder, and the main point is this, that when we're making an assumption, we think, what is another possible explanation? Right, you're going to a shopping center, and you're just about to get this really good parking space, and someone zips in and takes it, right? So we can assume that the person's just really, you know, what might we assume about that person? Inconsiderate, right? Yeah, only thinking about himself. Now what happens, but what is another possible explanation? Because you see him then run into the store. There's some emergency maybe, yeah. Why not think of something a little more positive? And in the reality, what happened to me once was, you see him coming up about a minute later, helping a very, very pregnant woman to the car, and then he zips off, and apparently her water broke when she was in the, so I felt terrible, because I was, thinking of all kinds of not very nice words to say to him. So, other explanations. Right? So when we're making a negative assumption, especially about a devotee, think about what's another possible explanation. Okay? And maybe this the battery on this. Oh. And when you find yourself making, this is the main one, when you find yourself making assumptions, be curious. Right? What if Parvati would have been curious, what might she have said to Chitraketu?
She would have asked her.
What?
Could you clarify?
Yeah, could you clarify? Are you making fun of my husband? And Chitraketu would say, no, right? If Parikshit Maharaj, would have sat around and waited, and then when Samak Rishi opened his eyes, he just said, were you faking samadhi just so you didn't want to greet me? And again, Samak Rishi would have clarified things. Or if Sachi Mata would have asked Advaitacharya, did you preach to Vishwarup to take sannyas? So being curious, instead of judgmental, clears us of doing a lot of Vaishnava Aparadha. It's a very simple thing to do usually. And in general, especially when dealing with devotees, assume good intentions, make positive assumptions. Now, every now and then a devotee does something really, really terrible, but in general, if we assume good intentions, when you're bringing up children, if you what do they call it? Self-fulfilling prophecies, right? When you deal with a child as if they're really going to well-behave, they tend to want to be well-behaved. Okay, so you make positive assumptions, even if the person has some mixed motives, they want to improve. Okay, so before we go on, questions, comments, thoughts on assumptions? The number one cause of conflict. I heard a yes. Oh, way in the back. Yes, Boo.
Regarding these assumptions, like when there's someone in the corporate world,
In the corporate world?
when I was
boss makes an assumption about us?
Yeah, because he was influenced by someone else and they did not fact check the assumption.
They didn't fact check, yeah.
And we get impacted. Like how do we come up with it?
How do we come out of it? You're not talking about a specific case, are you? Well, yes, I work a lot I'm not corporate, I mean, I don't know if you consider NASA corporate. I work for, I'm supposed to be retired, but I still consult for 3 companies. That's what I was doing in Korea. What did you do to try to fix it?
Well, I just shared what my intentions were, and I expect other people opinion, but I'm not being correct.
How did that go when you shared your intentions?
Well, but I think in the long run,
Yeah, and the last part I didn't hear.
in the long run, not everyone is a very for a moment, they hear it, they are okay, and then they
They sometimes, like a rubber band, they snap back. Yeah, yeah, but it sounds like what you did was really good. You clarified your intentions. And that's so interesting that you're doing that because let's skip ahead a little bit and we'll get back to him. Since you brought it up, if this thing is working, it may have died out. Wait a second. Sorry, 1 second, we have technical issues. Yeah, here we go. Yes, now that you brought it up, it's really scary when you think about it. In any communication, we're only sure of 50%. When I speak to you, I know my intention, but I don't know the impact I have on you. And when you speak to me, I know the impact you have on me, but I can't read your mind, I don't know your intention. So in any communication, we're only sure of 50%. So the Kali Yuga really, takes advantage of this. Like, have you ever spoken to someone and you can tell by their body language they don't understand what you're saying? You ever heard that, right? So our intention doesn't match our impact. And when I train leaders, both in ISKCON and also in the outside world, I try to scare them a little bit. I say, if you knew how much communication you had to do to avoid miscommunication, you wouldn't want to be a leader. Because whenever there's a little vacuum in communication, people assume negative things. Right? So here, it's good that he wasn't aware of your intention. So you tried to clarify that. I think that's really good what you did. And it sounds like you were trying to be a little proactive about it as well. You must have heard some rumblings that he heard from somebody something about you. Is that right? It causes worry and anxiety, especially if you're dealing with your boss. So it sounds like you did much better than letting it just keep worrying about it. You actually did something about it. You went and spoke to him. So then the question is, would it work for you to go to the source of the rumors, the people that were telling your boss about you? That's. It could backfire, yes. Yeah, corporate politics, I'm well aware. That's why organizations hire me. I'm the ombudsman. And ombudsmen are people you can come to confidentially, like you come to me confidentially and talk to me about it. And you could ask me to talk to those people who are spreading rumors. And anyway, we won't get into all that right now. But it sounds like you did good. You did well. Other questions, comments, thoughts on assumptions? Yes, Prabhu.
Sometimes we think if we clarify, the person will make assumption about us. So how do we come out of that trap?
Well, they're already making assumptions about you, so why not another one? Everything depends on desha, kala, patra, right? Time, place, and circumstance. There's not that many things in this world that are completely objective. right? Like, even in Krishna conscious philosophy, there's some objective things. What's an objective fact about in our philosophy? We are the soul. Yes, we're the soul, we're not the body. That is a fact, right? Not going to change. What else?
Krishna is absolute truth. Krishna is absolute truth.
Krishna is the absolute. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. Ekam Sakala Pumsam. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. Yes, that doesn't change. Okay, one more. We need a spiritual master. Yeah, Ado Guru Padashraya, right there in Nectar of Devotion. Okay, but when you think about when Lord Krishna walks into the wrestling arena, there was so much subjectivity there, right? What did Kamsa see him as? Death personified, yes, right? And the gopis saw him differently, and the impersonalists saw him as a super soul. You know, everyone saw him differently. So even Krishna, even amongst devotees, we have our own individual relationship with Krishna that is, you could say, subjective, right? So, why was I bringing that up? Because, so, you have to decide, is it worth it to do that in every situation? And sometimes it can be really helpful, though. Because the mind, well, we have some great quotes on the mind from the 11th canto from the Avanti Brahmana. The mind is a tricky fellow. And people can, they have one, well, here's an example. Everyone in the room, think of someone that you really, really trust. Okay, someone that you really, really trust. Not Prabhupada and not your Guru Maharaj, that's cheating. That's cheating. But besides them, someone you really, really trust. Okay? You would even give them the PIN number to your debit card. I'm Jewish, so that's very serious. Okay? What, your hands up about what?
Yeah, asking.
No, I don't want you to say who it is. Just think about it.
Everyone keeps saying.
Are you married?
No.
Okay, good. No wonder you're so happy. Okay. All right. So now, think of someone that you really don't trust. In America they say you don't trust them as far as you can throw them. Right? You really just somehow or other your karma with this person is really, you really don't trust them. Okay, got that person in your mind? Don't think about them too long. Don't get anxious. Okay, so now, what's the difference in the way you communicate with those two people? People that you really trust and the person that you don't trust. So we're very careful of the person we don't trust, right? We choose our words, we think it could end up on Instagram in 5 minutes from now, right? Yes. And what about the person we do trust? Very open, right? Your heart's just... How do you feel physically when you're with the person you don't trust and the person that you really love and trust? Claustrophobic with the person you don't trust. Yeah, you actually feel it, and your body has a reaction. Yeah. So trust is, So my point in terms of your question is you have to see, what is the level, what is the relationship like with the person that you're dealing with. This sort of stuff is very time, place, and circumstance, isn't it? Yeah, like that. I was going to say something else. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, one of my favorite quotes. Does anyone here know Peter Burwash, or heard of him? Peter Burwash? One person. Wow, okay. 2, 3, okay, a few devotees. Yeah, Peter's a devotee, he passed away now. And he had an amazing good fortune. Prabhupada spent 3.5 hours with him, telling him how to run a Krishna conscious business. 3.5 hours in Los Angeles. He was a professional tennis player and a professional hockey player. I don't know how, those seem like very different. Yeah, but anyway. But Prabhupada told him one thing that's so helpful when you think about that person you don't trust. He said, Prabhupada told him, do not be upset at the agent of your karma. Do not be upset at the agent of your karma. So if somebody's giving you a hard time, it's just they're giving you your karma on a nice silver platter and say, here, please take. Right? Isn't that a powerful statement? Do not be upset at the agent of your karma. They're just delivering your karma to you. Yeah. Anyway, I always found that to be powerful. So this is something to keep in mind, though, that just because, it's really important to have good intentions. What's a good verse about intentions? The number one verse. I'm thinking, of course, you can't read my mind, but there's one verse, the main verse of the Nectar devotion, and it's all about intention. If I give you the first word, you'll know it. Anyabi Lasita. I guess you all know it. Jnana Karma Navrita Anukliyena Krishnanu Silana Bhakti Uttama. So Uttama Bhakti is free from other desires except for the desire to serve Krishna. So it's so important to have good intentions. That verse is the Paribhasya Sutra, the main verse of Nectar devotion. And it's also sometimes really important to be able to communicate our good intentions. Because some people misread our good intentions sometimes. Right? Prabhupada's own godbrothers misread his good intentions sometimes. So what to speak of us? Right? So we also need to sometimes be able to communicate our good, and that's also kind of answering indirectly your point. Okay, so now I have to go back a whole bunch of slides. Okay, so my question is, what do you see? Passion? Sports? Worry?
Swearing.
Sweating. Okay.
Revenge.
He won?
Revenge.
Revenge.
Just 1 point.
Just 1 point. Emotions. I couldn't hear it. Could you say it a little louder? Celebrating a point? Okay, right.
He's learning something. He made a mistake. He's trying to.
He made a mistake. Okay, we got a whole variety of things here. Angry and frustrated. Okay, wow. All from one picture. Yeah. So, note what was the question I asked? What do you see? A couple of people literally answered the question. They said sweating, right? And sports. You almost get half credit. But most of us went immediately from just an observation to an interpretation. By the way, I'm not finding fault with you for that. It's natural. But you see the difference? Like nobody said, I see Nike wristband, a blue and white headband, pointing his index finger, muscles, right? Even though the question was, what do you see? We immediately went to interpretation. It's natural. Okay? Let me see if this is still working. Okay. So, it's really helpful in our devotee relationships to be able to separate our observation from interpretation, and evaluation is even worse. So the observation is just neutrally seeing what we said, Nike headband, wristband, etc., blue shirt, like that. I don't say we have to avoid these. Interpretation is what most of you did. He was won a point, he's frustrated. Evaluation would be he's frustrated and he's in the lower modes of material nature and he's immediately karmic. Not that we would say that, but you know what I mean. It was something that we actually, right? So it's not so easy to just observe neutrally. A couple of quotes on that. The highest form of intelligence is the ability to observe without evaluating. That one, well, if you're from America, you might get the joke, but you can observe a lot just by watching. Yogi Berra was a funny person. That was his name, Yogi, by the way. For most of us, it is difficult to make observations, especially of people and their behavior, that is free from judgment, criticism, or other forms of analysis. It's not so easy to do that. Right? So, observation so instead of saying Krishna Das procrastinates, we might say Krishna Das saves all his Diwali shopping until the day before Diwali. You see the difference? Instead of old people are slow drivers, a more specific observation would be no matter what road he is on, my elderly uncle always drives 15 kilometers below the speed limit. So there's a difference between observation and interpretation. Okay, and by the way, we go on for just 4 more hours, is that right? Joke. So there, 3 of these are observations. Which ones? Number 2, yes, you're right, number 2, yes. Last night, rather, that's, number 2 is just an observation, yes. Number 7, yes. And the last one's a little tricky.
9.
Yes, number 9. Red isn't my color would be a interpretation, but the fact that Lalita Dasi just said that, that's just a fact. Very good, okay, you all get top marks. All right, so we did that, and yes, good intentions, bad results. We have to be a little careful. We can have good intentions and not have good results sometimes, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so this is just how we, my hope is that we will be more conscious now of assumptions because they're so important in Vaishnava Sangha. The whole point of this is not, teach specifically conflict resolution, but actually to serve the Vaishnava community by having, increasing our relationships. So this is just a general way we learn things. Like I'm sure none of you were really meditating on assumptions an hour ago. Is that a fair assumption? Yes. Yeah, okay. So we were kind of unconscious, incompetent. We didn't even know, But then now, okay, we learned about them. We're conscious that, wow, I make assumptions sometimes and I don't really catch myself. Then we can start becoming better at it, conscious, competent, become good at it, and then eventually it just becomes second nature. I mean, I've been teaching these things for 20 years now, so hopefully I'm getting over to this. That's the way we learn pretty much anything. I mean, when you drive a car now, you probably don't even think about it, right? But when you first got, anyone remember when you first got your learner's permit? You first started driving? Or you were riding a bicycle? Like that. So. Okay, so should we talk about more causes of conflict? How are we doing? Okay, we're doing okay. So you can have conflict over any of these. For information, a lack of information can cause conflict, right? We speculate about information, or we just don't know. You might not know about a GBC resolution or about something Srila Prabhupada said on a particular topic. Right? And so that lack of information, or someone has the information, someone doesn't. Right? And different views of what information is relevant. Well, some people say a temple is successful by the number of guests that come on Sunday. Someone else says the number of books that are distributed. Someone says the youth preaching. Or devotees are becoming deeper in their hearing and chanting. So you can what information is relevant can cause conflict. Right? And then resources, of course, cause conflict. Right? Is anyone here married? Do you ever have fights over money? Never. That's fantastic. You're the only people in the whole world. Yeah. Anyway, conflict over resources, and sometimes there's something deeper going on than the resources. Relationships, of course, cause conflicts. They can create sometimes codependency, or we can be inflexible or extra flexible, followed by resentment. You know, in other words, we give in to the other person, or we fight no matter what to the death. And different perspectives over past conflicts may need to be addressed. So relationships cause conflict, but structures can also cause conflict. Right? Structures can also access to power, access to resources. Conflicts about the authority of gurus vis-a-vis the temple president. That happens in a lot of places in ISKCON. Right? There's a whole paper written by the GBC for parallel lines of authority. Right? And sometimes competing goals, caring for devotees and spreading Krishna consciousness. But just to give you an example, this was from my work life, but I was in an office once that they made widgets. They produced something, and whoever produced the most got a big bonus at the end of the year. And the mood in the office was really not nice at all. Everyone was like upset when someone else would do better than them. Actually, this happened also. I'll use the one from when I was a Sankirtan leader in 1979. Similar. He said that whoever distributed the most books for the marathon, in those days we called it the Christmas marathon, would go to India for the festival. And I could see there wasn't a very nice atmosphere amongst the Sankirtan, the book distributors. So the next year I spoke to the temple president and I said, let's set a really, really high goal for the team. And if the team reaches that goal, we'll have enough money and we can send everyone to India for the festival. And that totally changed the atmosphere. Everyone was encouraging everyone when they did better, and they actually reached the goal and all went to India. Yeah? So structures can cause conflict. Systems can cause conflict also. And definitely the last one, naturally, values can cause conflict. We say our values are formed by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but also, where do we get our values from besides Gurus, but Sadhu and Shastra? Parents, yeah. Tradition. Surroundings, environment. School, yeah. Education.
Media.
Media, big time these days. Yes. Yeah. And also purva samskars, impressions from previous lives. Right? Those are also there. Right? Yeah. So there's a lot of different values. So the story I tell is I was helping to manage the Vrindavan temple in the 90s. And the Goshala was getting overcrowded. Anyone been to the Goshala in Vrindavan? Yeah, okay. It was getting kind of crowded in those days. So I'm from New York. So I theoretically understood that milk came from a cow, but I really basically thought it came from the store. But I grew up in the concrete jungle, I never saw a cow I grew up in New York. So I just said, well, obviously we have to slow down or stop the breeding of the cows, there's not enough space. And then we had a devotee from Bihar, actually, this very senior devotee from Bihar, and he's from the village in Bihar. And he said, that's sinful. And I was incredulous. What do you mean it's sinful? It's just practical. And he said, no, the way he grew up in the village of Bihar is that if you can't stop a cow from breeding, it's just not appropriate. So we had very different value, and we're very close friends. But on so many things, we see the world differently because of our different upbringing, etc. And still somehow we're trying to serve Srila Prabhupada. So values can go very deep, right? Because they deal with our identity. So if I join Krishna consciousness and I change my eating habits, my hairstyle, my clothing, right? There's so many things. I put a lot of investment into being a member of ISKCON. And then you come along and you do the same thing. And we have a difference. It's going to be more intense because we poured so much of our identity into the organization. Right? So sometimes conflicts in religious organizations are more intense because of that. The first book I read on conflict resolution in religious organizations was a Christian book. And this was the first sentence. Ready for this? It said, Christians don't fight. They fight dirty. That was the first sentence in the book. So values can really be tricky because we put so much of our identity into it. So conflicts, they sometimes are the most difficult to resolve, and we get defensive. Okay, so questions, comments on this? We've covered all the sources of conflict except for one. The last one is when there's unclear expectations. Unclear expectations can really cause conflict. I'm trying to think of an ISKCON example. Well, I guess in the old days, it's not so much like this now, but when I became a brahmachari in the 70s, I just figured ISKCON would just take care of me the rest of my life, and I would just remain brahmachari the rest of my life. And I was 18, 17 years old. I didn't know anything about the world or anything, right? So that was kind of my expectation. Luckily, my transition into Grihastha life was pretty smooth, mainly because my mother helped us financially. But in those days, the person gave up all their occupations, everything, became a brahmachari, and then, if they get married 10 or 15 years later, what are they going to do for a living, right? So, or if, let's say, a husband and wife, they get married, but before they get married, they don't talk about how many children they want. And the man said, no, I don't, maybe one child at the most. And the wife's thinking 3 at least. Is that going to cause conflict? So unclear expectations can also cause conflict. Yeah. So questions, comments, we covered all the various sources of conflict. And Kalo Dosha Niderajan, this Kali Yuga, it is an ocean of faults. Right? And this word alaya? Like, what is Bhojan alaya? What does that mean?
Place.
Yeah, it's a restaurant, right? It's the alaya, the place you get both, right? Food. What's Aushodalaya?
Hospital.
Pharmacy or chemist, place you get medicine. What is Dukalaya? Earth. The whole universe. So Krishna says Dukalaya. So he's really clarifying expectations, right? If we think this material world is just supposed to be really nice, and every now and then there's a problem, that is not connected to Krishna's quite clear, but he's really trying to clarify our expectations of this world. He says, Janma, Mrityu, what else? Yeah, we have our scholar right here. She finished all my Sanskrit slokas. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, right? Dukkha, Doshan, and Darshanam. We should kind of have darshan of remembering that, right? And there's another place Krishna says, Anityam, know the other word? Asukha, right? Sukha, we know, asukha. So Krishna is really trying to clarify expectations. Matter of fact, we should be surprised when things go well every now and then, if we follow Krishna's. So he really tries to clarify expectations. So it's amazing we get along as well as we do, actually. Because Kali Yuga is such a, we sometimes joke, oh, it's Kali Yuga. My dear Prabhu's Mataji said, it really is Kali Yuga. It really is Kali Yuga. I was just in Seoul, South Korea. It was so hard to find vegetarian food there. There was a few vegan restaurants, and I have my Chat GPT open, and I kept taking, because the ingredients are all in Korean. So and Chat GPT, no, you can't eat that. No, you can't eat that. So my feast the last day, because I couldn't get to one of those restaurants, was potato chips and cream cheese. So I was saying, God, Kali Yuga, all those, I think there's 21 million people in Seoul. They're all eating terrible things. My gosh. Then I walk here at a vegetarian restaurant. I said, where were you when I was in Seoul? It was hellish. It was really hellish. Cream cheese and potato chips, that was my feast. Hare Krishna. Comments, questions, thoughts on sources of conflict? Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, I think the root cause is the false ego. Because of the false ego, we doubt other intentions. Because we are self-centered, we think everything from our perspective that okay, his intentions are not good for me, and that's probably the reason why the conflicts.
Yes. Okay, now he's getting really existential. Yes. The false ego is really the big problem, right? It is the most subtle of all the, and what's the verse? Umir? Yeah, the ahankara. If we think the mind is a problem, the mind is a servant of the false ego. The mind reinforces the false ego. Right? The mind is simply para avara sankalpa vikalpa, right? It's accepting and rejecting, all based on what?
Impression.
Who we think we are, our false ego. And so the false ego is so subtle and so powerful. The false ego is so powerful that it takes us who are completely spiritual and convince us we're completely material. And then the mind, all day long, is accepting and rejecting according to who we think we are. Incredible, isn't it? Yeah, so yes, ultimately the false ego is a big problem. And therefore, ultimately, chanting Hare Krishna is a clue, because Prabhupada talks about how the holy name dissolves the false ego. Of course, Mayavadis think that means we just want to dissolve ego completely, right? But we don't want to do that. We just want the real ego. There's 8,400,000 ways to not think we're Krishna's servant. Isn't it? It's really, it's serious stuff. Hare Krishna. I mean, I know how much trouble I have to deal with my false ego. Just walking, I was just doing some chapel walk this morning here in Singapore. Just thinking, all these people, they have no idea that they're actually Krishna's eternal servant. Hare Krishna. Thank you for that, Prabhu. Other thoughts? Yes.
So there's a confusion here, Prabhuji. So when I walked in and saw the topic, so I thought maybe if we just read NOI and we follow the 6 methods of developing nice exchanges with devotees, conflicts may not arise. But then it's a big framework here, because we cannot control who we deal with. I mean, of course, we have to cultivate relationship. We know the person, then we do those other 6 things or 6 processes. But we may interact with everybody else in another temple, anywhere, any other devotee. So the conflicts may arise. So it's a big framework that conflicts will definitely happen, and we have to be careful about observations and assumptions. So that is a big takeaway for me. So it is not just limited to the 6 exchanges. I feel it's more than that.
Well, yeah, you have all these realizations because you have the Shakti of that garland. I hope that was prasadam. I always, in India, I should have mentioned about myself. So I joined I saw Prabhupada in 76, joined in 77, but we switched GBCs in the GBC meeting in February of 77, and the outgoing GBC of my temple didn't tell the incoming GBC about who needed to get initiated, so I wasn't initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And then so I've been initiated 3 times, because 2 times my gurus fell down. They had some problems in the 80s, which was, if you know the history of ISKCON, those kind of things happened. But I think you know my Guru Maharaj now, Burijan Prabhu. He was here the other day, a couple of weeks ago. Yes. So, why was I saying that? your point was, senior moment, I forgot what he said. Oh, you were just, the garland, no, but before that. Yes, the 6 exchanges, that's of course between devotees. And on a certain level, the most powerful one is Guyam Akyati Prishti. Right? If we have 1 or 2 or 3 really close friends in this world, we're very, very fortunate. I have a presentation I could make on friendship next week if you want, but because you probably don't want to hear about conflict for 2 weeks in a row. Friendship is so important in Krishna consciousness, right? We know Narottam Das Thakur's song, Ramachandra Sangha Mage Narottama Dasi. He lists all these great devotees, his worshipful lords, and then at the end he talks about his friend Ramachandra. Okay? And it's so important to have someone that we can actually be fully honest with. We don't have to put on a show, we don't have to, dress nicely on Sundays, but who knows what we do during the week. But we have someone we can act, even one person that we can really open up to. It's so important in Krishna consciousness. It's very, very important. And therefore I often like to say that friendship is a verb. I know it's a noun by English grammar, but it's something we sometimes have to work on. If we don't have we don't have someone like that, we should work on finding someone that we can really develop that kind of relationship with. I feel really blessed that one of my best friend is probably Brahmatirtha Prabhu, Bob Cohen, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, if you've seen that book. And then my other best friend perhaps is Yogeshwar Prabhu, who Prabhupada sent him to France to start the movement in France many years ago. And he's written a book on Prabhupada called Swami in a Strange Land, and he's just finishing a wonderful book on Lord Chaitanya. So I just feel very fortunate I have those devotees. And also Burijan Prabhu, he's my guru, but also, in the 7th canto, Brahmachari Guru Kule, anyone know the rest of that verse? We stumped you don't know that one. I guess because you're not a Brahmachari. But anyway, it says one should have firm friendship with the Guru. And, anyway, it's a long story, my relationship with him. Okay. Quickly, the first time I met Burijan Prabhu, I chastised him. That was like 1979. I was this fired up Brahmachari Sankirtan leader. And he came to the Detroit temple where I was serving. And we sat down at lunch, and I said, Prabhu, I didn't know who he was, no idea. And if he's very unassuming, right? Isn't he? Externally, he doesn't, he's not an unassuming person. And so I said, Prabhu, what's your service? And he said, I'm a teacher. And I said, well, do you also go on Sankirtan? And he said, no, I'm a full-time teacher. I said, that's Maya. I said, Prabhupada said, everyone should join the Sankirtan party as soon as possible. And he just picked up his tray and moved to a different temple. And then someone later, like, do you know who that is? He's a very senior disciple. He joined in 1967. And fast forward 20 years and I take initiation from him, right? So I made an assumption. Luckily he forgave me. Well, I don't know what he thought at that time. He just walked away. But so we do have to be a little careful. I was going to talk about emotions, but I don't want to rush it. So if you come back tomorrow, we're going to talk about how our emotions affect us and how to deal with conflicts. And it's really worth the price of attendance. So it's free. But anyway, because there's only 5 ways to deal with conflicts. And we'll learn how to deal with them really, really powerfully and effectively. So we have a few more minutes before our other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
In one of the slides you mentioned, assume good intentions.
Yes.
And then when we look at the ladder, it says that our belief affect the data we select next time, like the arrow shows, right? So how to make sure that we are not cognitively getting into the trap that what we are assuming as the good intention is the correct data to make the accurate judgment?
Well, we're not sure, right? We can't read people's minds. And that's why, and if you remember, I emphasized the word generally assume good intentions. Of course, this example may be more for New York than Singapore, but if you're walking on a dark alley at night and you see a person coming the other way and they're 3 times your size, it might be good to just assume that just to be safe, walk another way. Right? So that's why I say, generally assume good intentions. But sometimes people have bad intentions. We have to be in Kali Yuga, we have to be a little on guard. Yeah, but generally in the Vaishnava Sangha, we assume good intentions. Because it's more likely that we're going to assume bad intentions and be wrong, and assume good intentions and be wrong, generally. But of course, if somebody's, as Prabhupada would say, a real rascal, that's a different thing. And unfortunately, sometimes people do take advantage of other people in Kali Yuga, even if they're wearing tilak. So it's possible. Other questions? We have to end on a positive note after that one. 3 more minutes. Yes, Prabhu.
For a lot of time, we are very invested emotionally in let's say the moment. We identify ourselves in a certain way. Certain standards which we think are the real standards, and we are very invested on that, but when we see it is being toned down or it's being allowed or permissible, we feel a bit devastated, or we feel that I've spent so much of time working towards that. So it's a different topic, but I think if you want to just, does it lead to conflict? Does it lead to some emotional breakdown?
Does it lead to conflict? Oh, do you have an hour? We could answer that question. This is a whole other presentation, but we do need to meditate. This is a deep meditation. This is really serious stuff. Where is our ultimate shelter? Right? Where is our, sometimes we call it our rest, or where do we find our ultimate solace? And, this is a deep meditation, not something to just, whatever. It really has to be in Krishna. And we take shelter, sometimes when people are really in anxiety, they go online and check their bank balance. Oh, okay, I have some money in my account. It's all good. So we might find security in our bank balance, in our relatives, in ISKCON, in our beauty, in our intelligence. But the ultimate shelter is in Krishna. And we have to, we want to remember Krishna. I was with Burijan Prabhu in Perth a couple of weeks ago, just before he came, after he came here. Went to Perth. And we were taking prasadam together every day. And sometimes we would talk about this or that, but at some point he'd say, tell me something about Krishna. And it's amazing how everything changed when we started talking directly about Krishna. So, your question, yes, it's kind of a very tricky thing. We're attached, why are we, at least I can speak for myself, I'm attached to ISKCON's success and serving ISKCON because of Prabhupada. It's his movement, he started it, so I'm his servant. He saved me. Who knows where I would be without him, right? But at the same time, that it can be, I wouldn't say unhealthy, it can be unhealthy if we forget in the course of ISKCON about Krishna. Right? And Krishna has his way of dealing with things. And even when there was problems in the Gaudiya Math, Prabhupada at one time said it was providence. So our ultimate identity can't be anything other than Jivera Sukh Ahoya Krishnera Nityadas. And at that time we will end with Krishna Das. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.